In this free short course, we will better understand natural theology from a deistic perspective. Natural theology logically proves that only one true deity exists, who is the God of natural theology, as well as his most essential and fundamental attributes. It logically proves that other deities like him do not and absolutely cannot exist with him. This course simplifies deistic natural theology, as opposed to monotheistic revealed theology. Natural theology is the study of the God of natural theology through logical proof for his attributes and existence. We will first better understand the concepts of existence, attributes, and proof. Also, understanding logical opposites is paramount to understanding natural theology. Existence entails the presence of proof for existence, and the presence of proof entails existence. In other words, if something exists, there must be proof for its existence, whereas if something does not exist, there must be absolutely no proof for its existence. A complete absence of proof entails non-existence or nothingness. Proof for existence entails attributes which completely define existence. That is to say, the proof for the existence of a being is manifested or shown in its attributes which completely define its very existence. A being cannot exist without its attributes because its attributes completely define its very existence. Absolutely nothing at all can exist without attributes. As an example, a sphere possesses fundamental attributes like color, shape, and size. The attributes of the sphere are not separate parts from the sphere, rather, they are of the sphere itself. The attributes completely define the sphere's very existence. A sphere cannot exist without its attributes. Furthermore, three-dimensional space possesses at least three fundamental attributes, the three spatial dimension. Three-dimensional space cannot exist without its three spatial dimensions. Time possesses at least three fundamental attributes, the past, present, and future. Time cannot exist without its past, present, or future. Not to mention energy and matter exist in a great number of diverse attributes and varieties. Just as space-time and physical objects are completely defined by their attributes, the God of natural theology is also completely defined by his attributes. An existence itself is not an attribute. Rather, an existence is the sum of its attributes. Therefore, the very existence of anything is completely defined by its attributes. In this presentation, we will better understand abstract and concrete existence. There are only two types of existence, abstract and concrete. Abstract and concrete existence are opposites of each other, just as existence and non-existence are opposites of each other. Abstract existence is conceptual, whereas concrete existence is ontological. Understanding the difference between abstract and concrete existence is equally as easy as understanding the difference between abstract nouns and concrete nouns. A being is a concrete entity that does exist, used to exist, will exist, or could exist. All abstract so-called objects are actually concepts because abstract is completely conceptual. A being can only ontologically exist, which means that all beings absolutely cannot conceptually exist. By contrast, a concept only conceptually exists, which means that all concepts absolutely cannot ontologically exist. All of abstract existence are concepts, which includes logic and mathematics, whereas all of concrete existence are beings, which includes the God of natural theology himself, who is a logically self-consistent being. Logic is a fundamental concept that unconditionally governs all other concepts. All concepts are truly uncreated and permanently unchangeable. For example, the fact that 1 + 1 = 2 absolutely cannot be changed to equal any other number. Concepts are like blueprints, definitions, laws, or rules that all beings unconditionally obey. It is absolutely impossible for beings to become concepts, and it is absolutely impossible for concepts to become beings. The number of concepts that do indeed exist is truly infinite. For example, the number of mathematical numbers is truly infinite, which simply means that numbers go on forever and ever. Also, the number of diverse colors that conceptually exist is truly infinite. Therefore, it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of new colors, which we have never seen before, can be created by the God of natural theology. A being is an instance of a concept because a concept is like a blueprint or definition. For example, human beings are created instances of the basic generic concept of a human. And it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of humans can be created by the God of natural theology. A physical object is a physical being that possesses fundamental attributes such as color, shape, and size. For example, instances of matter are physical objects that possess fundamental attributes such as color, shape, and size. Our universe is a created instance of both the concept of three-dimensional space and the concept of time. In other words, our universe is a created instance of space-time. And it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of instances of space-time or universes can be created by the God of natural theology. The concept of space-time as a universe is simply just one basic generic concept. The physical constants and laws of our universe are created as attributes of our universe by the God of natural theology when he created our universe. Therefore, it is logically possible for him to effortlessly change the physical constants and laws of our universe. Changing the physical constants and laws of any universe would be infinitely easy for him to do. However, absolutely all concepts, such as the laws of logic, are permanently unchangeable and truly uncreated. Therefore, he absolutely cannot change any concepts. The laws of logic unconditionally govern all of existence, both abstract and concrete, which includes the God of natural theology himself, who is a logically self-consistent being. Absolutely nothing can exist outside of logic or without logic, because the laws of logic are the very foundational laws of the very concept of existence itself. In other words, to simply just exist entails logic. In this presentation, we will better understand contingent and necessary existence. Understanding both contingent and necessary existence is paramount to understanding natural theology. There are only two types of concrete existence: contingent and necessary. Contingent and necessary existence are opposites of each other, just as abstract and concrete existence are opposites of each other. There is only one necessary existence, the God of natural theology. By contrast, there are two types of contingent existence: the actual world and all possible worlds. That is to say, there is only one actual world, whereas there are an actual infinite number of possible worlds. All of contingent existence is conditional because it is completely defined by and completely dependent on conditions, dependencies, and essential fundamental limits. Therefore, it is logically possible that all of contingent existence simply not exist at all, which simply means that the non-existence of contingent existence is logically possible. A contingent being is one whose existence is conditional and whose non-existence is logically possible. Contingent existence includes all of space and time and all of their contents. All of contingent existence, which includes all of space-time, is created by the God of natural theology from absolute nothing. That is to say, he created all of contingent existence out of absolutely nothing at all, and he absolutely cannot extract anything from himself to create anything. Also, all of contingent existence is completely finite because all of contingent existence possesses essential fundamental limits, which are dependencies. Contingent beings are simply created instances of concepts. For example, it is logically possible that an instance of a unicorn can be created, and it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of unicorns with diverse colors and sizes can be created by the God of natural theology. Furthermore, it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of instances of space-time, or universes with different physical laws and constants, can be created by the God of natural theology. All of contingent existence is truly dependent on the God of natural theology to create and sustain their existence, and all of contingent existence is completely dependent on his allowing them to simply exist at all. The actual world is simply all of contingent existence that actually does exist, as opposed to not existing at all. The actual world includes all things that existed in the past, used to exist, do exist in the present, and will exist in the future. By contrast, all possible worlds refer to all of hypothetical existences, all of non-existent realities that could exist, and all of the what-if circumstances and what-if situations that could have happened. A possible world is a hypothetical existence that is logically possible to be actualized or created. However, it has never existed, and it will never exist. The number of logically possible realities that could exist is truly infinite, and the number of things that could be created is truly infinite. Therefore, the true number of possible worlds is actually infinite, whereas there is one and only one actual world. All possible worlds are never actualized and will never be actualized, even though their existence is logically possible to be actualized or created by the God of natural theology. All possible worlds are merely possible to exist. The very concept of a possible world entails that a possible world must absolutely never be allowed to exist. In other words, if a possible world gets actualized or created, then it immediately becomes of the actual world and is therefore no longer a possible world. That is to say, for a possible world to be truly a possible world, it absolutely cannot be allowed to be actualized or created, so it must always be completely non-existent and yet logically possible. It is important to understand that a possible world does not include the very far distant future of the actual world. The very far distant future, such as countless trillions of years from now, is of the actual world because it is going to be actualized. That is to say, it is going to happen. Always remember that a possible world is merely an ontological possibility, nothing more and nothing less. Necessary existence is absolute and unconditional, as its non-existence is logically impossible. It absolutely cannot cease to exist. Necessary existence is only one necessary being whose existence is absolutely necessary, and whose non-existence is logically impossible. One of the fundamental differences between contingent and necessary existence is that necessary existence entails only one necessary being, and that necessary being is the God of natural theology himself. In other words, other necessary beings absolutely cannot coexist with him because their existence is logically impossible. Therefore, necessary existence is completely unique to the God of natural theology. Necessary existence is uncreated and truly infinite. The God of natural theology is the one and only necessary being. In other words, he himself completely equals necessary existence. He is completely independent of contingent existence, whereas contingent existence is truly dependent on him. We can begin to easily know and understand the God of natural theology by understanding simple facts or inferences. Firstly, we know that our universe possesses an absolute beginning to its existence, so from this simple fact or inference, we know that our universe needs the uncreated creator, who is the God of natural theology, to create our universe. Secondly, we know the dichotomy between contingent and necessary existence entails fundamental differences between them, so from this simple fact or inference, we know the God of natural theology is absolute, necessary, uncreated, truly infinite, and completely independent, whereas contingent existence is conditional, created, finite, and dependent. Thirdly, we know that logic unconditionally entails self-consistency for all of existence, so from this simple fact or inference, we know that the God of natural theology must be a logically self-consistent being. His flawless self-consistency entails that all of his attributes perfectly entail each other. All of his attributes are perfectly consistent with each other. And fourthly, by understanding his flawless self-consistency, we can easily know and understand 6 of his fundamental attributes that are relevant to our contingent existence by extrapolating from the simple fact that he is absolute, necessary, uncreated, truly infinite, and completely independent. Also, by understanding the arguments of natural theology, we can easily know and understand 6 of his fundamental attributes by extrapolating from the arguments of natural theology. In this presentation, we will better understand likeness and uniqueness in the context of natural theology. Likeness is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence, whereas true uniqueness is a fundamental attribute of the God of natural theology. Likeness and uniqueness are opposites of each other. In contingent existence, everyone and everything that do exist and could exist are ontologically similar to each other in many ways because they all possess ontological similarity. In our universe, all living and non-living beings are ontologically similar to each other in many ways. All of the physical stuff in our universe are ontologically similar to each other in many ways. Each and every physical object possesses similar attributes such as color, shape, and size. Other similar attributes of physical objects include that each and every physical object is fundamentally defined by space and time, and is completely dependent on space and time. Even if physical objects may appear to be different with no apparent similarities, they do indeed possess many ontological similarities. For example, what are the ontological similarities between something like a grain of sand and a black hole? Both possess the attributes of color, shape, and size. Both possess an absolute beginning to their existence. Both possess the attributes of density, mass, volume, and weight, and both are completely dependent on space and time. The only noticeable differences between the grain of sand and the black hole are in the amounts or degrees of their attributes. That is to say, the black hole is exponentially denser, heavier, and more massive than the grain of sand, and its size is much bigger. Both possess a different type of color and shape, yet both possess the basic generic attributes of color and shape. Furthermore, both space and time, or simply space-time, share at least 4 known ontological similarities with physical objects. Firstly, the fact that both space-time and physical objects are conditional or contingent, which means that their non-existence is logically possible, is the first known ontological similarity they share. Secondly, the fact that both space-time and physical objects are created and finite is the second known ontological similarity they share. Thirdly, the fact that both space-time and physical objects are changeable, dependent, spatial, and temporal is the third known ontological similarity they share. And fourthly, the fact that it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of instances of space-time can be created, like how it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of physical objects can be created, is the fourth known ontological similarity they share. It is logically possible that many other universes can exist. That is to say, it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of universes can be created by the God of natural theology. Our universe is simply a created instance of the concept of space-time. Our universe is not and cannot be truly unique in any way because it is logically possible that other universes could exist. True uniqueness entails that one and only one being or instance of its kind does exist, and that other beings or instances of its kind cannot exist. Therefore, true uniqueness entails that it is absolutely impossible for more than one truly unique being to exist. The God of Natural Theology possesses true uniqueness as one of his fundamental attributes. He is the one and only truly unique being. Therefore, other beings or instances like him absolutely cannot exist. True uniqueness equals his uniqueness, which equals his being, which equals necessary existence. His uniqueness entails that he is completely and ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence, completely outside of contingent existence, and completely separate from contingent existence, which also entails that all of contingent existence is completely and ontologically dissimilar to him, completely outside of him, and completely separate from him. In other words, he and contingent existence are completely separate from each other, completely outside of each other, and completely and ontologically dissimilar to each other in every possible way. Furthermore, his uniqueness entails that he himself absolutely cannot be mingled or mixed with contingent existence, and contingent existence absolutely cannot be mingled or mixed with himself. In other words, his existence and contingent existence absolutely cannot be mingled or mixed with each other in any manner. He is completely dissimilar to all of space, time, and physical objects. He is completely outside of space and time. He is completely separate from space and time. And he absolutely cannot mingle or mix with space, time, or physical objects. Space, time, and physical objects are completely dissimilar to him. Space and time are completely outside of him. Space and time are completely separate from him. And space, time, and physical objects absolutely cannot mingle or mix with him. In simpler words, he is howless, immaterial, spaceless, and timeless, which also entails that absolutely nobody can imagine him because he is completely and infinitely beyond and dissimilar to all types of imaginations. All types of imaginations can only render contingent or created attributes like color, shape, size, how, when, and where. He absolutely cannot possess any contingent or created attributes. Therefore, it is logically impossible to imagine him. Absolutely nothing can resemble him in any manner. In other words, absolutely nothing could be ontologically similar to him in any manner. Everyone and everything that could exist, but do not exist and will never exist, are completely and ontologically dissimilar to him in every possible manner. Absolutely nothing of the actual world can resemble him in any manner. And absolutely no possible world can resemble him in any manner because he is completely and ontologically dissimilar to the actual world and all possible worlds. In the next presentation, we will better understand his fundamental attribute of actual true eternity. In this presentation, we will better understand potential and actual eternity. Potential eternity is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence, whereas actual eternity is a fundamental attribute of the God of Natural Theology. Potential and actual eternity are opposites of each other. Time possesses essential fundamental limits. That is to say, all of space-time possesses an absolute beginning, a potential end, and a finite number of units of time. In other words, an absolute beginning is an essential fundamental limit of space-time. A potential end is an essential fundamental limit of space-time, and units of time are essential fundamental limits of space-time. Temporal limits are the essential fundamental limits of time, whereas spatial limits are the essential fundamental limits of space. Therefore, all of space-time entails both spatial limits and temporal limits. Time is completely defined by a successive addition of incremental parts, which are units of time. Units of time are temporal limits, and absolute beginnings and ends are also temporal limits. Temporal limits are some of the many types of essential fundamental limits of contingent existence. It is logically impossible for space-time to be beginningless because a beginningless space-time is an infinite regress. As an example, try to imagine if you were to receive a physical object like gold after an infinite amount of time has passed. Would you ever be able to receive the object? The answer is absolutely no, because it is logically impossible for there to exist an actual infinite amount of time. Infinite regresses are self-contradictions or self-inconsistencies. For space-time to be both finite and infinite simultaneously is a self-contradiction, like how a married bachelor or a square circle is a self-contradiction. The fact that each and every unit of time is finite entails that space-time as a whole is finite and temporal. In other words, an actual infinite number of units of time is logically impossible. Therefore, all of space-time is both finite and temporal. Logic unconditionally entails that infinite regresses and all other self-contradictions or self-inconsistencies are logically impossible to exist. In other words, it is logically impossible that time could have eternally existed into the past, just like how it is logically impossible to jump out of a bottomless pit, as there is simply no bottom to jump up from. Therefore, it is logically impossible for time to even have a present now without possessing an absolute beginning to its existence, from which it began to reach the present now. The past is completely dependent on the present, and the present is completely dependent on the past. The fact that the present, the now, exists is indisputable proof that time had an absolute beginning to its existence and that it is completely dependent on its absolute beginning. It is logically possible that time can continue to exist forever and ever into the future, constantly trying to reach an infinite future as the ideal limit, but can never actually reach an infinite future. In other words, it is logically impossible for an actually infinite future to exist. Neither the past nor the future can be an actual infinite because both an actual infinite past and an actual infinite future are logically impossible. Potential eternity is simply an instance of space-time that continues to exist forever and ever into the future, constantly trying to reach an infinite future as the ideal limit, but can never actually reach an infinite future. Therefore, the future is always finite. The potential eternity of time is a potentially infinite future. However, the actual future will always be finite. By contrast, actual eternity is completely timeless eternity. Therefore, actual eternity is true eternity. Actual eternity possesses absolutely no beginning, no end, and no units of time whatsoever. The God of Natural Theology possesses actual eternity as one of his fundamental attributes. His eternity entails his uniqueness because actual eternity is truly unique to him. That is to say, he is the one and only being who is truly eternal and uncreated. In other words, space-time and everyone and everything except him are created. Being actually eternal, which is timeless and uncreated, is truly unique to him. The fundamental attribute of actual eternity is truly unique to him. Only he alone is uncreated, whereas all of space, time, and everyone and everything outside of him are created and could be potentially eternal. Our universe is created, and it is logically possible that our universe can continue to exist forever and ever into the future, constantly trying to reach an infinite future as the ideal limit, but can never actually reach an infinite future. In other words, our universe will always possess a finite future. His uniqueness entails his eternity because his uniqueness is eternally true of him, possessing absolutely no beginning and no end. That is to say, his uniqueness is truly eternal and uncreated. In simpler words, he has always been truly unique and will forever always be truly unique. And he can absolutely never resemble contingent existence in any manner because his uniqueness absolutely cannot have had a beginning, nor can it ever come to an end. Also, for him to be truly unique and uncreated, he must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence, which is created and finite. He is the uncreated creator of all of contingent existence, and he absolutely cannot resemble his creation, which is all of contingent existence, in any manner. He not only is but also must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all created beings that do exist and could exist, which also entails that he absolutely cannot mingle or mix with his creation, for he is completely separate from his creation. His flawless self-consistency entails that all of his fundamental attributes directly and equally entail each other. In the next presentation, we will better understand his fundamental attribute of actual true infinity. In this presentation, we will better understand potential and actual infinity. Potential infinity is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence, whereas actual infinity is a fundamental attribute of the God of Natural Theology. Potential and actual infinity are opposites of each other. Space possesses essential fundamental limits, a finite amount of space, a finite number of spatial dimensions, and a finite number of units of time. All of space-time is completely dependent on its essential fundamental limits and is completely defined by its essential fundamental limits. In other words, a finite amount of space in all directions is an essential fundamental limit of space-time, and a finite number of spatial dimensions is an essential fundamental limit of space-time. Remember that spatial limits are the essential fundamental limits of space, whereas temporal limits are the essential fundamental limits of time. Any amount of space is a spatial limit. A distance between two locations is a spatial limit, and a finite number of spatial dimensions is a spatial limit, whereas a finite number of units of time is a temporal limit. Just like temporal limits, spatial limits are some of the many types of essential fundamental limits of contingent existence. Both spatial limits and temporal limits entail each other. In other words, both space and time entail each other and cannot exist without each other. It is logically impossible for space to possess no limits at all, which means that it is logically impossible for space to possess an actual infinite amount of space, because an actual infinite absolutely cannot exist in contingent existence. All of contingent existence is truly finite. Therefore, it is logically impossible for an actual infinite amount of space, time, or anything else to fit inside a finite container like contingent existence. In other words, an actual infinite amount or number of anything absolutely cannot exist inside contingent existence because contingent existence is a finite container of creation or created existence. Trying to contain or fit an actual infinite inside a finite container, contingent existence, is a self-contradiction, and all self-contradictions are logically impossible. As an analogy, think of a glass of water. If you try to put more water in the glass than the maximum amount of water that the glass can contain, then it overfills. In other words, the glass cannot contain more water than its maximum capacity, which is a finite capacity. The fundamental attributes of space are the spatial dimensions. Three-dimensional space possesses three fundamental attributes, which are the three spatial dimensions. Without any spatial dimensions, space simply could not be space at all. What fundamentally defines space as space are the spatial dimensions and the amount of space in each and every spatial dimension or direction. Therefore, the fundamental attributes of space are spatial dimensions. The number of spatial dimensions that do exist and could exist will always be a finite number. Space is fundamentally defined by a finite number of spatial dimensions, as well as a finite amount of space in all directions. Therefore, it is logically impossible for space to possess an infinite number of spatial dimensions. In addition, for space-time to possess both a finite number of spatial dimensions and an infinite amount of space is a self-contradiction. In other words, to be both finite and infinite simultaneously is a self-contradiction. Logic unconditionally entails internal consistency, which is also called self-consistency, for all things that do exist and could exist. In other words, logical self-consistency is absolutely essential and fundamental upon the actual world and all possible worlds. Therefore, absolutely all self-contradictions or self-inconsistencies are logically impossible. Logical self-consistency entails that the amount of space in each and every spatial dimension will always be a finite amount because the number of spatial dimensions that do exist and could exist is always a finite number. In other words, the amount of space that could exist will always be a finite amount, and the number of spatial dimensions that could exist will always be a finite number. Furthermore, if our universe exists inside a multiverse, the multiverse also possesses both a finite amount of space and a finite number of spatial dimensions, as it is logically impossible for a multiverse to possess an actual infinite amount or number of anything. Actual infinites, also called actual infinities, absolutely cannot exist in creation or contingent existence. It is logically possible that the amount of space of an instance of space-time can continue to expand larger and larger in all directions forever and ever, constantly trying to reach an infinite amount as the ideal limit, but can never actually reach an infinite amount of space. No matter how expansive or wide the amount of space is, it will always be a finite amount that is forever expanding. Potential infinity is simply an amount of space that forever expands larger and larger, constantly trying to reach infinity as the ideal limit, but can never actually reach infinity. Therefore, the amount of space will always be finite. The potential infinity of space is a potentially infinite amount of space in all directions. However, the actual amount of space will always be finite. By contrast, actual infinity is completely spaceless infinity. Therefore, actual infinity is true infinity. Actual infinity possesses absolutely no space, no amount of space, and no spatial dimensions whatsoever. The God of Natural Theology possesses actual infinity as one of his fundamental attributes. His infinity entails his uniqueness because actual infinity is truly unique to him. That is to say, he is the one and only being who is truly infinite, and he absolutely cannot possess any type of essential or fundamental limit. In other words, space-time and everyone and everything except him are finite because they possess essential fundamental limits. Being actually infinite is truly unique to him. The fundamental attribute of actual infinity is truly unique to him. Only he alone is truly infinite, whereas all of space, time, and everyone and everything outside of him are finite and could be potentially infinite. Our universe is finite, and it is logically possible that our universe can forever expand larger and larger in all three of its spatial dimensions, constantly trying to reach infinity as the ideal limit, but can never actually reach infinity. In other words, our universe will always possess a finite amount of space. His uniqueness entails his infinity because his uniqueness is infinitely true of him, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever. That is to say, his uniqueness is truly infinite. In simpler words, there are truly an infinite number of ontological dissimilarities between him and contingent existence. Therefore, there absolutely cannot be even just one ontological similarity between him and contingent existence. Also, for him to be truly unique and infinite, he must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence, which is created and finite. He absolutely cannot resemble contingent or finite existence in any manner. He not only is but also must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all finite beings that do exist and could exist, which also entails that he absolutely cannot mingle or mix with finite beings, for he is completely separate from contingent or finite existence. Also, his infinity entails his eternity because his infinity is eternally true of him, possessing absolutely no beginning and no end. That is to say, his infinity is truly eternal and uncreated. In simpler words, he has always been truly infinite and will forever always be truly infinite because his infinity absolutely cannot have had a beginning, nor can it ever come to an end. Remember that essential fundamental limits include absolute beginnings and ends. Therefore, possessing absolutely no beginning and no end entails his infinity because his infinity is truly eternal and uncreated. Of course, being truly eternal and uncreated entails complete timelessness, possessing absolutely no temporal limits whatsoever. His eternity entails his infinity because his eternity is infinitely true of him, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever. That is to say, his eternity is truly infinite. In simpler words, his eternity is a true infinity because his eternity absolutely cannot possess any type of limits whatsoever. Remember that absolute beginnings and ends are essential fundamental limits. Therefore, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever entails his eternity because his eternity is truly infinite. Of course, being truly infinite entails complete spacelessness, possessing absolutely no spatial limits whatsoever. His flawless self-consistency entails that all of his fundamental attributes directly and equally entail each other. In the next presentation, we will better understand his fundamental attribute of essential true immutability. In this presentation, we will better understand essential mutability and essential immutability, or simply essential changeableness and essential unchangeableness. Essential mutability is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence, whereas essential immutability is a fundamental attribute of the God of Natural Theology. Essential mutability and immutability are opposites of each other. Essential changes truly change the state of being or existence of a being or concrete entity. There are many types of essential changes. Essential increases and decreases to the amounts or degrees of attributes are essential changes. For example, increasing or decreasing the size of an object essentially changes the object. The bigness or smallness of the object's fundamental attribute of size is essentially changing. Increases and decreases to the amount of knowledge that an intelligent being possesses are essential changes. If an intelligent being learns something new, then the increase in his or her knowledge is an essential change to the intelligent being, and therefore he or she essentially changes. Increases and decreases to the number of abilities that a powerful being possesses are essential changes. If a powerful being acquires or gains a new ability, then the increase in his or her abilities is an essential change to the powerful being, and therefore he or she essentially changes. Changes to the kind or type of an attribute, such as changing the color or shape of an object, are essential changes. In other words, changing the kind of shape of an object, such as converting a cube into a sphere, is an essential change. And changing the kind of color of an object, such as from blue to red, is an essential change. Also, to add a new attribute to a being is an essential change to the being because it is an increase to the number of attributes that the being possesses. For example, if a human being gains a new attribute such as a sixth sense in addition to his or her 5 senses, then he or she essentially changes from a human being with 5 senses to 6 senses. Moreover, to remove an attribute from a being is an essential change to the being because it is a decrease to the number of attributes that the being possesses. For example, if a human being loses an attribute such as his or her eyesight, then he or she essentially changes from a human being with 5 senses to 4 senses. Essential mutability or changeableness is simply defined as the capacity of essential changes. Any being or concrete entity that possesses essential changes is truly changeable. All essential changes are temporal limits. They are essential fundamental limits of space-time. Time is what essentially changes both space-time and all of the contents of space-time. In other words, absolutely all units of time are essential changes. Each and every unit of time is an essential change to not only both space and time, but also all of the contents of space-time. Even if a physical object appears completely changeless or frozen in space at 0 degrees Kelvin, the physical object is indeed essentially changing with each and every unit of time because the physical object is fundamentally defined by space-time and completely dependent on space-time. The number of units of time that the physical object possesses is constantly increasing with each and every unit of time that passes. Therefore, the physical object is essentially changing even though it is completely frozen and motionless. All of space-time and all of its contents are essentially changing with each and every unit of time that passes. Also, an absolute beginning of space-time is an essential change, and an absolute end of space-time is an essential change. Absolutely nothing of space-time can exist before an absolute beginning. and absolutely nothing of space-time can exist after an absolute end. However, the action of creating an instance of space-time out of absolute nothing is an essential change because it had changed from a state of non-existence into a state of existence. By contrast, essential immutability, which is true immutability, is the attribute or state of truly essential and permanent unchangeableness. It is the opposite of essential mutability. Essential immutability, which is true immutability, entails complete and permanent timelessness, as all essential changes are absolutely impossible. The God of Natural Theology possesses essential immutability as one of his fundamental attributes. Essential immutability entails that he is truly immutable or unchangeable, which renders all essential changes logically impossible. He absolutely cannot essentially or truly change himself in any manner, therefore, absolutely none of his attributes can be removed from him, and absolutely no new attribute can be added to him. In other words, the number of his attributes absolutely cannot increase or decrease. Furthermore, absolutely none of his attributes can essentially increase or decrease in their amount or capacity because the amount or capacity of each and every one of his attributes is truly infinite, eternal, uncreated, and immutable. There is absolutely no need for an increase to any of his attributes because he is completely and unconditionally independent of all types of needs. His immutability entails his uniqueness because essential immutability is truly unique to him. That is to say, he is the one and only being who is truly unchangeable, and he absolutely cannot be essentially or truly changed in any manner. In other words, space-time and everyone and everything except him are truly changeable because they possess essential changes. Being essentially or truly unchangeable is truly unique to him. The fundamental attribute of essential immutability is truly unique to him. Only he alone is truly unchangeable, whereas all of space, time, and everyone and everything outside of him are truly changeable. His uniqueness entails his immutability because his uniqueness is immutably true of him. Being absolutely impossible to change, that is to say, his uniqueness is permanently unchangeable. In simpler words, because he is both truly unique and unchangeable, he absolutely cannot be changed into resembling contingent existence, his creation, in any manner. Also, for him to be truly unique and unchangeable, he must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence, which is changeable. He absolutely cannot resemble contingent or changeable existence in any manner. He not only is but also must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all changeable beings that do exist and could exist, which also entails that he absolutely cannot mingle or mix with changeable beings, for he is completely separate from contingent or changeable existence. His eternity entails his immutability because his eternity is immutably true of him. Being absolutely impossible to change, that is to say, his eternity is permanently unchangeable. In other words, his eternity absolutely cannot be changed to possess a beginning or units of time, nor can his existence come to an end because his immutability entails that he is truly unchangeable, which therefore entails that his eternity is permanently unchangeable. Remember that absolute beginnings and ends are also essential changes. Therefore, possessing absolutely no essential changes whatsoever entails his eternity because his eternity is permanently unchangeable. His immutability entails his eternity because his immutability is eternally true of him. Possessing absolutely no beginning and no end, that is to say, his immutability is truly eternal and uncreated. In simpler words, he has always been truly unchangeable and will forever always be truly unchangeable because his immutability absolutely cannot have had a beginning, nor can it ever come to an end. Remember that essential changes include absolute beginnings and ends. Therefore, possessing absolutely no beginning and no end entails his immutability because his immutability is truly eternal and uncreated. Also, his infinity entails his immutability because his infinity is immutably true of him, being absolutely impossible to change. That is to say, his infinity is permanently unchangeable. In other words, he absolutely cannot be changed to possess any type of essential or fundamental limit because his immutability entails that he is truly unchangeable, which therefore entails that his infinity is permanently unchangeable. Remember that essential fundamental limits include essential changes. Therefore, possessing absolutely no essential changes whatsoever entails his infinity because his infinity is permanently unchangeable. His immutability entails his infinity because his immutability is infinitely true of him. Possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever, that is to say, his immutability is truly infinite. In other words, his immutability absolutely cannot be limited in any manner. Out of an infinite number of circumstances or conditions, he absolutely cannot truly change himself in any manner because his immutability is truly infinite. Remember that essential changes are temporal limits, which are some of the essential fundamental limits of contingent existence. Therefore, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever entails his immutability because his immutability is truly infinite. His flawless self-consistency entails that all of his fundamental attributes directly and equally entail each other. In the next presentation, we will better understand his fundamental attribute of infinite simplicity. In this presentation, we will better understand complexity and simplicity, as well as finite simplicity and infinite simplicity. Finite simplicity is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence, whereas infinite simplicity is a fundamental attribute of the God of Natural Theology. Finite simplicity and infinite simplicity are opposites of each other. The complexity of objects is the composition of parts to form a whole. That is to say, beings are concrete entities that are made of parts and whose parts are made of smaller parts are complex objects. For example, we understand that atoms are made of parts like protons and electrons, and protons are made of smaller parts like quarks. Anyone or anything that is made of parts is a complex object, which is divisible into parts and is an ontological complexity. However, an ontological complexity absolutely cannot be actually or truly infinite. All types of ontological complexities are always finite. A being or concrete entity absolutely cannot be made of an infinite number of parts that get forever smaller ad infinitum, because an actual infinite absolutely cannot exist in contingent existence or space-time. Therefore, an actual infinite absolutely cannot exist in parts. All self-contradictions are logically impossible. An actual infinite ontological complexity is a self-contradiction. Therefore, an actual infinite ontological complexity is logically impossible. Simplicity entails indivisibility. That is to say, a truly simple being or object is indivisible. Therefore, it cannot be made of parts nor can it be divided into parts. In other words, a truly simple being or object exists completely independently of any parts. Finite simplicity is a most fundamental attribute of space-time and all of its contents. For example, each and every most fundamental unit of matter is a finite simplicity. The plural of finite simplicity is finite simplicities. The most fundamental units of matter are finitely simple objects, which are finite simplicity, because they are not made of any parts nor can they be divided into parts. The smallest units of time are finitely simple units, which are also finite simplicity, because they are not made of any smaller units nor can they be divided into smaller units. Finite simplicity is indeed simplicity, which is indivisible, but it entails and possesses essential fundamental limits, such as shape and size. Each and every finitely simple object is fundamentally defined by its essential fundamental limits of shape and size. Try to imagine a finitely simple cube, which would exist completely independently of any parts. The finitely simple cube is not defined by any parts because it is not made of any parts. However, it is fundamentally defined by its shape and size. Both shape and size are not only fundamental attributes of the finitely simple cube, but also are essential fundamental limits of the finitely simple cube. Both shape and size can only ever possess finite amounts, finite kinds, finite types, finite values, and finite variations. In other words, everything about shape and size is completely finite. Therefore, all types of shape and size are essential fundamental limits of both complex objects and finitely simple objects. A physical object absolutely cannot be infinitely big or infinitely small, and it absolutely cannot be shapeless. No matter how big or small and no matter what kind of shape, each and every physical object entails and possesses a finite shape and a finite size. Each and every physical object is fundamentally defined by its fundamental attributes of shape and size, which are also essential fundamental limits of physical objects. In other words, all physical objects are fundamentally defined by their essential fundamental limits of shape and size. By contrast, infinite simplicity is the attribute or state of being infinitely simple, possessing absolutely no parts and no finite simplicities whatsoever. It is the opposite of finite simplicity. Infinite simplicity entails complete and permanent spacelessness, as all parts and finite simplicities are absolutely impossible. Also, the very concept of true infinity entails that absolutely nothing can be added to increase it, and absolutely nothing can be subtracted to decrease it. True infinity cannot be added, subtracted, multiplied, or divided because true infinity is unconditionally immutable, indivisible, and simple. In other words, true infinity is infinitely simple. The God of Natural Theology possesses infinite simplicity as one of his fundamental attributes. Infinite simplicity entails that he absolutely cannot be made of parts or finite simplicity, and that he absolutely cannot be divided into parts or finite simplicities. Also, infinite simplicity entails that he himself completely equals all of necessary existence, and that all of necessary existence completely equals him. That is to say, his being completely encompasses and fills all of necessary existence. Therefore, there absolutely cannot be any room for another being or entity to exist inside necessary existence. As an analogy, imagine just one and only one physical object occupying all of the space of a universe. If the one object alone completely fills and occupies all of the space in that universe, then there simply is no more room for other objects to exist inside that universe. It is logically impossible for another being or entity to exist in necessary existence with the God of Natural Theology because he himself fully and permanently encompasses all of necessary existence, which is truly infinite simplicity. His infinite simplicity entails his uniqueness because infinite simplicity is truly unique to him. That is to say, he is the one and only being whose simplicity is truly infinite, and he absolutely cannot be of finite simplicity. In other words, space-time and everyone and everything except him are complex beings, as well as finitely simple beings because they possess essential fundamental limits. Being infinitely simple is truly unique to him. The fundamental attribute of infinite simplicity is truly unique to him. Only he alone is infinitely simple, whereas all of space, time, and everyone and everything outside of him are either complex or finitely simple. His uniqueness entails his infinite simplicity because his uniqueness is infinitely simple in him, being absolutely impossible to divide. That is to say, his uniqueness is truly infinite simplicity. In simpler words, his uniqueness absolutely cannot be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicity. Nor can his uniqueness be shared with contingent existence in any manner, for dividing or limiting his uniqueness is logically impossible. Also, for him to be truly unique and infinitely simple, he must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence, which is finite. He absolutely cannot resemble contingent or finite existence in any manner. He not only is but also must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all complex and finitely simple beings that do exist and could exist, which also entails that he absolutely cannot mingle or mix with complex or finitely simple beings, for he is completely separate from contingent or finite existence. His eternity entails his infinite simplicity because his eternity is infinitely simple in him, being absolutely impossible to divide. That is to say, his eternity is truly infinite simplicity. In other words, his eternity absolutely cannot be divided or limited into parts such as units of time. Nor can his eternity become a finite simplicity because his eternity is truly infinite simplicity. Remember that absolute beginnings and ends, as well as units of time, are some of the types of essential fundamental limits of contingent existence. And remember that the smallest units of time are finite simplicities because the smallest units of time are finite, simple, and indivisible. Also, an absolute beginning, as well as an absolute end, is a finite simplicity because an absolute beginning cannot be divided into smaller actions or events. For example, an absolute beginning of a universe is a finite, simple, and indivisible action that creates an instance of space-time from absolute nothing. An absolute beginning is both an essential change and a finite simplicity. Therefore, possessing absolutely no finite simplicities whatsoever entails his eternity because his eternity is truly infinite simplicity. His infinite simplicity entails his eternity because his infinite simplicity is eternally true of him. Possessing absolutely no beginning and no end, that is to say, his infinite simplicity is truly eternal and uncreated. In other words, he has always been infinitely simple and will forever always be infinitely simple because his infinite simplicity absolutely cannot have had a beginning, nor can it ever come to an end. Remember that finite simplicities include absolute beginnings and ends. Therefore, possessing absolutely no beginning and no end entails his infinite simplicity because his infinite simplicity is truly eternal and uncreated. His infinity entails his infinite simplicity because his infinity is infinitely simple in him, being absolutely impossible to divide. That is to say, his infinity is truly infinite simplicity. In other words, his infinity absolutely cannot be a finite simplicity because his infinity is truly infinite simplicity. Also, the very concept of true infinity entails indivisible and infinite simplicity. Remember that essential fundamental limits include finite simplicities. Therefore, possessing absolutely no finite simplicities whatsoever entails his infinity because his infinity is truly infinite simplicity. His infinite simplicity entails his infinity because his simplicity is infinitely true of him. Possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever, that is to say, his simplicity is truly infinite. In other words, his simplicity absolutely cannot be limited in any manner because his simplicity is truly infinite, hence, infinite simplicity. Remember that finite simplicities are some of the types of essential fundamental limits of contingent existence. Therefore, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever entails his infinite simplicity because his simplicity is truly infinite. Also, his immutability entails his infinite simplicity because his immutability is infinitely simple in him, being absolutely impossible to divide. That is to say, his immutability is truly infinite simplicity. In other words, his immutability absolutely cannot be a finite simplicity because his immutability is truly infinite simplicity. Remember that absolute beginnings and ends not only are essential changes, but also are finite simplicities. And the most fundamental smallest units of time not only are essential changes, but also are finite simplicities. Therefore, possessing absolutely no finite simplicities whatsoever entails his immutability because his immutability is truly infinite simplicity. His infinite simplicity entails his immutability because his infinite simplicity is immutably true of him, being absolutely impossible to change. That is to say, his infinite simplicity is permanently unchangeable. In other words, his infinite simplicity absolutely cannot be changed to a finite simplicity because his immutability entails that he is truly unchangeable, which therefore entails that his infinite simplicity is permanently unchangeable. Remember that finite simplicities include the most fundamental smallest units of time, as well as absolute beginnings and ends. And remember that absolute beginnings, absolute ends, and the most fundamental smallest units of time not only are finite simplicities but also are essential changes. Therefore, possessing absolutely no essential changes whatsoever entails his infinite simplicity because his infinite simplicity is permanently unchangeable. His flawless self-consistency entails that all of his fundamental attributes directly and equally entail each other. In the next presentation, we will better understand his fundamental attribute of infinite independence. In this presentation, we will better understand dependence and independence, as well as finite independence and infinite independence. Finite independence is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence, whereas infinite independence is a fundamental attribute of the God of Natural Theology. Finite independence and infinite independence are opposites of each other. Dependence entails dependencies. Dependencies are essential fundamental limits and needs that all contingent beings possess. Dependencies are not limited to breathing fresh air, drinking clean water, eating, or sleeping. There are many more types of dependencies. Parts are dependencies because complex objects are completely dependent on their parts to exist. Finite simplicities are also dependencies because they are completely dependent on their essential fundamental limits. For example, all finitely simple objects are completely dependent on their fundamental attributes of shape and size, which are essential fundamental limits of all physical objects. To possess ontological similarities such as color, shape, and size is to be completely dependent on the ontological similarities. Ontological similarities such as color, shape, and size are dependencies. All physical objects are completely dependent on ontological similarities such as color, shape, and size. Therefore, ontological similarities are dependencies. Color, shape, and size are both ontological similarities and dependencies. Existing inside space-time entails that one is completely dependent on space-time. Therefore, space and time are dependencies. Also, being changeable or mutable entails that one is dependent on essential increases to his or her attributes. For example, we humans are forever always dependent on increases to the amount of knowledge that we possess, as well as the number of abilities we possess. Therefore, essential increases are dependencies. Possessing an absolute beginning entails that one is completely dependent on an absolute beginning to its existence. For example, the God of Natural Theology creating space-time out of nothing entails that space-time is completely dependent on an absolute beginning to its existence. In other words, both space and time are completely dependent on an absolute beginning to their existence. Therefore, absolute beginnings are dependencies. Possessing essential fundamental limits entails that one is completely dependent on its essential fundamental limits. That is to say, to possess any type of essential limit entails that you are completely dependent on that limit. All dependencies are essential fundamental limits, and all essential fundamental limits are dependencies. Essential conditions are dependencies. Absolute beginnings, or being created, are dependencies. Spatial limits such as shape and size are dependencies. Temporal limits such as units of time are dependencies. Essential changes, especially essential increases, are dependencies. Finite simplicities are dependencies. Parts, or pieces of an object, are dependencies, and ontological similarities such as color, shape, and size are dependencies. The opposite of a dependency is an independency. That is to say, if one is independent of a specific someone or something, then he or she possesses an independency of that thing, which simply means that he or she is completely independent of that thing. Finite independence is a fundamental attribute of contingent existence. In other words, the amount of independence of contingent existence is always finite. Finite independence entails a finite number of independencies. It is logically possible that created beings can be completely independent of other created beings to exist. For example, if one physical object is completely independent of all other physical objects, then it possesses a finite number of independencies because the total number of physical objects that do exist and will ever exist is always a finite number. Therefore, all created beings can only ever possess a finite number of independencies. If an instance of space-time, or a universe, is completely independent of containing any physical objects, then it would possess a finite number of independencies. That is to say, If a universe is completely empty of physical objects, completely empty of energy and matter, then that universe would be completely independent of physical objects existing inside it, which would therefore entail that it would possess a finite number of independencies, because an actual infinite number of existent physical objects is logically impossible. However, even if a universe is completely empty of physical objects, completely empty of energy and matter, remember that the empty universe is always and will always be dependent on its essential fundamental limits, because both space and time are completely dependent on their essential fundamental limits, such as an absolute beginning to their existence and a finite amount of space in all directions. In other words, all of space-time is completely dependent on an absolute beginning to their existence, completely dependent on a finite amount of space in all directions, completely dependent on a finite number of spatial dimensions, and completely dependent on a finite number of units of time. Therefore, even if a universe is completely independent of physical objects, it is always completely dependent on its essential fundamental limits, such as its absolute beginning and its finite amount of space. All of contingent existence can only ever possess a finite number of independencies, because all of contingent existence, which includes all of space-time, will always possess dependencies, which are also essential fundamental limits. Therefore, all of contingent existence is completely dependent on essential fundamental limits. By contrast, infinite independence is the attribute or state of possessing an actual infinite number of independencies. Infinite independence entails absolutely no dependencies whatsoever. It is the opposite of finite independence. The God of Natural Theology possesses infinite independence as one of his fundamental attributes. His infinite independence entails that his existence is absolute, necessary, and unconditional. In other words, his existence absolutely cannot be dependent on any conditions or contingencies. His infinite independence entails that he possesses an actual infinite number of independencies, and that he possesses absolutely no dependencies whatsoever. His infinite independence entails that he is completely and infinitely independent of all of space-time. Being completely spaceless and timeless entails that he is completely independent of space and time. He is completely and infinitely independent of a how, to his being, or to any of his attributes. His infinite independence entails his uniqueness, because infinite independence is truly unique to him. That is to say, he is the one and only being whose independence is truly infinite, and he absolutely cannot be dependent or finitely independent. In other words, space-time and everyone and everything except him are finitely independent, because they possess a finite number of independencies, whereas only he alone possesses an actual infinite number of independencies. Being infinitely independent is truly unique to him. The fundamental attribute of infinite independence is truly unique to him. Only he alone is infinitely independent, whereas all of space, time, and everyone and everything outside of him are finitely independent. His uniqueness entails his infinite independence, because his uniqueness is completely independent of all types of ontological similarities. That is to say, he is completely and infinitely independent of resembling contingent existence, which is his creation, in any manner, because his uniqueness entails that he absolutely cannot resemble contingent existence, his creation, in any manner. In simpler words, his uniqueness is truly infinite independence, because he is completely independent of an infinite number of ontological similarities resembling his creation in any manner. Therefore, he absolutely cannot be dependent on even just one ontological similarity to his creation. Remember that the number of ontological dissimilarities he possesses is an actual infinite number of ontological dissimilarities, because his uniqueness is truly infinite. So he absolutely cannot possess even just one ontological similarity to his creation, for absolutely nothing of his creation can resemble him in any manner. Also, for him to be truly unique and infinitely independent, he must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence, which is truly dependent and only finitely independent. He absolutely cannot resemble contingent or dependent existence in any manner. He not only is but also must be completely and ontologically dissimilar to all dependent beings that do exist and could exist, which also entails that he absolutely cannot mingle or mix with dependent beings, for he is completely separate from contingent or dependent existence. His eternity entails his infinite independence, because his eternity is completely independent of an absolute beginning. That is to say, he is completely and infinitely independent of a beginning to his existence, because his eternity entails that he is truly beginningless or uncreated. In other words, he absolutely cannot be dependent on a beginning, because he is completely independent of a beginning. For him to be truly eternal and uncreated, as well as infinitely independent, he must be completely independent of a beginning and completely independent of all of space-time. Remember that an absolute beginning is a dependency, whereas possessing no beginning whatsoever, which means being beginningless or uncreated, is an independency, the opposite of a dependency. Therefore, possessing absolutely no dependencies whatsoever entails his eternity because his eternity is truly infinite independence. His infinite independence entails his eternity because his infinite independence is eternally true of him, possessing absolutely no beginning and no end. That is to say, his infinite independence is truly eternal and uncreated. In other words, he has always been infinitely independent and will forever always be infinitely independent because his infinite independence absolutely cannot have had a beginning, nor can it ever come to an end. Remember that dependencies include absolute beginnings. Therefore, possessing absolutely no beginning entails his infinite independence because his infinite independence is truly uncreated and eternal. His infinity entails his infinite independence because his infinity is completely independent of all types of limits. That is to say, he is completely and infinitely independent of all types of limits because his infinity entails that he is truly infinite. In other words, he absolutely cannot be dependent on any type of limit because he is completely and unconditionally independent of all types of limits. Remember that all types of essential fundamental limits are indeed dependencies. Therefore, possessing absolutely no dependencies whatsoever entails his infinity because his infinity is truly infinite independence. His infinite independence entails his infinity because his independence is infinitely true of him, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever. That is to say, his independence is truly infinite. In other words, his independence absolutely cannot be limited in any manner because his independence is truly infinite, hence, infinite independence. Remember that all types of dependencies are essential fundamental limits. Therefore, possessing absolutely no limits whatsoever entails his infinite independence because his independence is truly infinite. His immutability entails his infinite independence because his immutability is completely independent of all types of essential increases. That is to say, he is completely and infinitely independent of any type of increase to his attributes. In other words, he absolutely cannot be dependent on any type of increase to any of his attributes because he is completely and unconditionally independent of all types of increases. Remember that all types of essential increases are dependencies. Therefore, possessing absolutely no dependencies whatsoever entails his immutability because his immutability is truly infinite independence. His infinite independence entails his immutability because his infinite independence is immutably true of him. That is to say, his infinite independence is permanently unchangeable. In other words, his infinite independence absolutely cannot be changed to a finite independence because his immutability entails that he is truly unchangeable, which therefore entails that his infinite independence is permanently unchangeable. Remember that dependencies include essential changes, especially essential increases. Therefore, possessing absolutely no essential changes whatsoever entails his infinite independence because his infinite independence is permanently unchangeable. Also, his infinite simplicity entails his infinite independence because his infinite simplicity is completely independent of all types of parts and finite simplicities. That is to say, he is completely and infinitely independent of all finite simplicities and parts. Remember that he absolutely cannot possess parts or finite simplicities in himself because he himself is truly infinite simplicity. In other words, he absolutely cannot be dependent on any parts or finite simplicities because he is completely and unconditionally independent of all parts and finite simplicities. Remember that parts and finite simplicities are dependencies. Therefore, possessing absolutely no dependencies whatsoever entails his infinite simplicity because his infinite simplicity is truly infinite independence. His infinite independence entails his infinite simplicity because his infinite independence is infinitely simple in him, being absolutely impossible to divide. That is to say, his infinite independence is truly infinite simplicity. In other words, his infinite independence absolutely cannot be a finite simplicity because his infinite independence is truly infinite simplicity. His infinite independence absolutely cannot be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicities because his infinite independence completely encompasses his being, which is infinitely simple. Remember that dependencies include parts and finite simplicities. Therefore, possessing absolutely no parts and no finite simplicities whatsoever entails his infinite independence because his infinite independence is truly infinite simplicity. His flawless self-consistency entails that all of his fundamental attributes directly and equally entail each other. In the next presentation, we will better understand what is the number of fundamental attributes that he possesses. In this presentation, we will better understand the number of fundamental attributes of the God of Natural Theology. In other words, how many fundamental attributes does he possess? Firstly, just to briefly recap the 6 fundamental attributes that we do know about the God of Natural Theology. His uniqueness entails that all of his attributes are truly unique to him. Therefore, absolutely nothing else can possess any of his attributes. His eternity entails that all of his attributes are truly eternal and uncreated. Therefore, absolutely none of them can have a beginning or end. His infinity entails that all of his attributes are truly infinite. Therefore, absolutely none of them can be finite. His immutability entails that all of his attributes are truly immutable or unchangeable. Therefore, absolutely none of them can be changed in any manner. His infinite simplicity entails that all of his attributes are indivisible and infinitely simple in him. Therefore, absolutely none of them can be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicities. His infinite independence entails that all of his attributes are absolutely, completely, and infinitely independent of all types of dependencies. Therefore, absolutely none of them can be dependent on beginnings, conditions, increases, finite simplicities, limits, ontological similarities, parts, hows, whens, wheres, or any other type of dependency. Remember that his flawless self-consistency entails that all of his attributes entail each other and ontologically equal each other. In other words, all of his attributes are one and the same infinitely simple being, which is his very existence. How many fundamental attributes does the God of natural theology possess? We are only able to know and understand just 6 of his fundamental attributes. However, he most likely possesses an actual infinite number of fundamental attributes. But we are only able to know and understand just 6 out of an infinite number of fundamental attributes. Possessing an actual infinite number of fundamental attributes would make sense for the God of natural theology because he is truly infinite in every logically possible manner. For him to be truly infinite would logically entail that he possesses an actual infinite number of fundamental attributes. But we do not know for certain if he possesses an actual infinite number of fundamental attributes. However, we do know for certain that he possesses at least 6 fundamental attributes. Therefore, there are at least 6 fundamental differences between him and his creation or contingent existence. There are at least 6 fundamental differences between the God of natural theology and his creation or contingent existence. Remember that he and his creation are total opposites of each other. The only contingent existence, or creation, that we know is space-time. That is to say, all of the contingent existence that we know is all of space-time existence. We simply cannot know or understand another type of contingent existence that is completely different from the concept of space-time. Our contingent existence, which is all of space-time, possesses 6 fundamental attributes: likeness, potential eternity, potential infinity, essential mutability, finite simplicity, and finite independence. The 6 fundamental attributes of our contingent existence, which is all of space-time, are the opposites of the 6 fundamental attributes of the God of natural theology that we can know and understand. His uniqueness, which is true uniqueness, is the opposite of likeness, and vice versa. His eternity, which is actual true eternity, is the opposite of potential eternity, and vice versa. His infinity, which is actual true infinity, is the opposite of potential infinity, and vice versa. His immutability, which is essential true immutability, is the opposite of mutability, and vice versa. His infinite simplicity is the opposite of finite simplicity, and vice versa. And his infinite independence is the opposite of finite independence, and vice versa. The 6 fundamental attributes of our contingent existence, which is all of space-time, are only relevant to 6 of his fundamental attributes because the 6 fundamental attributes of our contingent existence are the opposites of only 6 of his fundamental attributes, and vice versa. If the God of natural theology does possess an actual infinite number of fundamental attributes, then this would entail that the potential number of fundamental attributes of contingent existence, or his creation, is potentially infinite, because he and contingent existence are total opposites of each other. This simply means that it would be logically possible that other types of contingent existence or creations, which would be completely different from the concept of space-time, can be created by the God of natural theology. If he does possess an actual infinite number of fundamental attributes, then it is logically possible that a potentially infinite number of different types of contingent existence, or creations completely different from the concept of space-time, can be created by the God of natural theology. With that said, however, there are 4 fundamental similarities that all other types of contingent existence would share with space-time. All types of contingent existence are completely contingent or conditional. That is to say, their non-existence is equally as possible as their existence, and their existence is truly dependent on the God of natural theology. Remember that absolute necessary existence is completely unique to the God of natural theology. And remember that a state of non-existence is logically impossible for the God of natural theology. All types of contingent existence are created out of absolute nothing by the God of natural theology. Being created from absolute nothing is one of their essential fundamental limits that defines them. Remember that being truly uncreated is completely unique to the God of natural theology. All types of contingent existence possess essential fundamental limits. That is, all of them are completely finite. Remember that being truly infinite is completely unique to the God of natural theology. All types of contingent existence are truly dependent on the God of natural theology, as they absolutely cannot exist without him creating them from absolute nothing. Remember that being infinitely independent is completely unique to the God of natural theology. If there are other types of contingent existence or creations, then we are completely unable to imagine or understand them because they would be completely different from the concept of space-time. All we can know and do know about them is that they would share 4 fundamental similarities with space-time because all of contingent existence is conditional, created out of nothing, completely finite, and truly dependent on the God of Natural Theology. In the next presentation, we will better understand his non-fundamental but completely essential attributes of true omnipotence and true omniscience. In this presentation, we will better understand ability and knowledge, as well as true omnipotence and true omniscience. Ability and knowledge directly entail each other. To possess an ability to perform an action, you must know how to perform the action. For example, to possess the ability to kick a ball, you must know how to kick a ball. Therefore, the ability to perform the action entails the knowledge of performing the action. To possess knowledge of how to perform an action, you must be able to perform the action. For example, to possess the knowledge of how to swim, you must be able to swim. Therefore, the knowledge of performing the action entails the ability to perform the action. Possessing any type of ability to perform an action entails the knowledge of performing the action, and possessing knowledge of performing an action entails the ability to perform the action. Also, possessing any type of knowledge, such as information, entails the ability of possessing the knowledge. This simply means that in order to possess knowledge in the first place, you must possess the ability and capacity of containing and preserving your knowledge. To possess knowledge of information entails the ability to contain and preserve the knowledge of information. That is to say, for one to possess knowledge about everyone and everything in our universe entails that he or she must possess the ability and capacity to contain and preserve his or her knowledge. Independence directly entails both abilities and knowledge. For example, if a powerful human being is completely independent of oxygen, then this entails 2 simple facts. It entails that he or she is able to live and survive without oxygen, and it entails that he or she knows how to live and survive without oxygen. Also, if a human is completely independent of other humans' assistance to build appliances, then this entails 2 simple facts. It entails that he or she is able to build appliances, and it entails that he or she knows how to build appliances. Therefore, independence directly entails both abilities and knowledge that are equal to the amount of independence. The reverse is equally true. Both ability and knowledge directly entail independence. If a powerful human being is able to live and survive without oxygen and knows how to live and survive without oxygen, then this entails a simple fact: he or she is completely independent of oxygen. Also, if a human is able to build appliances and knows how to build appliances, then this entails a simple fact: he or she is independent of other humans' assistance to build appliances. Therefore, both abilities and knowledge directly entail independence. Without independence, there are simply no abilities and no knowledge. Independence is the foundation of both abilities and knowledge. Remember that the God of Natural Theology possesses eternal infinite independence as one of his fundamental attributes. Because his independence is truly infinite, his abilities are truly infinite, and his knowledge is truly infinite. Also, his infinite abilities are truly eternal and uncreated, and his infinite knowledge is truly eternal and uncreated. His infinite independence directly entails both abilities and knowledge that are equal to his infinite independence. In other words, he possesses an actual infinite number of abilities and an actual infinite amount of knowledge. His eternal infinite abilities is true omnipotence, and his eternal infinite knowledge is true omniscience. True omnipotence and true omniscience are indeed completely unique to him. Both his omnipotence and omniscience are completely essential sub-attributes of his infinite independence. Both his omnipotence and omniscience indirectly entail his uniqueness because both attributes not only are completely unique to him, but also are ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence. Both his omnipotence and omniscience are completely immaterial, spaceless, and timeless, as his uniqueness entails that he himself is completely immaterial, spaceless, and timeless. Also, his uniqueness indirectly entails both his omnipotence and omniscience because for him to be truly unique is for him to possess truly unique attributes like true omnipotence and true omniscience, which are both completely unique to him and are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly unique uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his omnipotence and omniscience indirectly entail his eternity because both attributes are eternally true of him. Both attributes are beginningless, endless, truly eternal and uncreated, as his eternity entails that he himself is beginningless, endless, truly eternal, and uncreated. Also, his eternity indirectly entails both his omnipotence and omniscience because for him to be actually eternal is for him to possess truly eternal attributes like true omnipotence and true omniscience, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly eternal uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his omnipotence and omniscience indirectly entail his infinity because both attributes are infinitely true of him. Both attributes are truly infinite as his infinity entails that he himself is truly infinite in every logically possible manner. Also, his infinity indirectly entails both his omnipotence and omniscience, because for him to be actually infinite is for him to possess truly infinite attributes like true omnipotence and true omniscience, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly infinite uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his omnipotence and omniscience indirectly entail his immutability, because both attributes are immutably true of him. Both attributes are permanently unchangeable, which simply means that neither his omnipotence nor omniscience can increase or decrease, as his immutability entails that he himself is truly unchangeable. Remember that he does not and absolutely cannot need an increase to any of his attributes. Also, his immutability indirectly entails both his omnipotence and omniscience, because for him to be truly unchangeable is for him to possess truly unchangeable attributes like true omnipotence and true omniscience, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly immutable uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his omnipotence and omniscience indirectly entail his infinite simplicity, because both attributes are infinitely simple in him. Neither his omnipotence nor his omniscience can be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicities, as his infinite simplicity entails that all of his attributes are one and the same indivisible and infinitely simple being, which is simply himself. Therefore, absolutely none of his attributes can be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicities. Also, his infinite simplicity indirectly entails both his omnipotence and omniscience, because for him to be infinitely simple is for him to possess infinitely simple attributes like true omnipotence and true omniscience, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the infinitely simple uncreated creator of contingent existence. His omnipotence entails that he is able to do all things which are logically possible. All actions he does are always outside of himself. Therefore, absolutely no action can happen inside of himself. He is able to effortlessly create any type of being or concrete entity whose existence is logically possible out of absolutely nothing at all. Remember that all created beings are completely separate from himself and completely outside of himself. In other words, he is able to very easily create all things that are logically possible from absolute nothingness. He is able to effortlessly change any being or concrete entity, as long as the change is logically possible, except himself, because he himself is truly unchangeable. In other words, he is able to effortlessly change all things outside of himself. Remember that all things he creates and all other actions he does are completely separate from himself and completely outside of himself. Whatever he creates is created from absolute nothingness, which simply means that it is created out of absolutely nothing at all, and therefore absolutely nothing can be extracted from himself to create anything. In other words, he absolutely cannot truly change himself in any manner, because his immutability entails that he himself is truly unchangeable. He can only truly change his creation, all of the contingent existence, but he absolutely cannot essentially or truly change himself in any manner. Furthermore, he is able to effortlessly annihilate or vanish any being or concrete entity from existence, except himself, because he himself is truly unchangeable. Therefore, he absolutely cannot die or cease to exist. He is able to effortlessly annihilate or vanish all things outside of himself. Absolutely each and every type of action is infinitely easy for him to perform. In other words, absolutely each and every type of action, task, or thing is completely effortless for him to create or do. He can very easily create a potentially infinite number of universes without any difficulty whatsoever, because his omnipotence is truly infinite. Absolutely nothing can be difficult for him to do. Absolutely everything logically possible is infinitely easy for him to do. In other words, absolutely each and every type of action that is logically possible is infinitely easy for him to do, completely and infinitely effortless for him to do, and therefore there is absolutely no difficulty whatsoever. However, he absolutely cannot create or do something that is logically impossible. An example of a logically impossible action is trying to place the earth inside an egg without enlarging the egg or shrinking the earth. Another example of a logically impossible action is trying to make 1 + 1 = 3. Nonetheless, the actual number of things that logically could exist is truly infinite. If their existence is logically possible, he can effortlessly create a potentially infinite number of them. For example, he can effortlessly create a potentially infinite number of universes from absolute nothing. His power or omnipotence is truly infinite, because the number of contingent things he can create is infinite. In other words, there is absolutely no limit on the number of contingent things that could be created by him. Therefore, his power is truly infinite in every logically possible manner. His omniscience entails that he knows absolutely all things that do exist, will exist, and logically could exist. He knows absolutely all things in space, ranging from the biggest of big things to the smallest of small things. He knows absolutely all actions and events in time, including all actions and events in the actual future, and he knows absolutely all infinite number of potential or logically possible futures. He knows absolutely all details, ranging from the most generic to the most specific details. He knows absolutely all of space and time, which is the foundation of our contingent existence, and he knows absolutely all other types of contingent existence if they logically can exist. He knows absolutely all what if circumstances, what if conditions, and what if situations. He knows precisely how they would happen if they were to happen, including absolutely all of their tiniest of details. He knows what each and every possible individual would intentionally do in an infinite number of what if circumstances, conditions, and situations. In other words, he completely and perfectly knows absolutely all truly infinite number of possible worlds because his knowledge or omniscience is truly infinite in every logically possible manner. He knows absolutely all abstract objects, all truly infinite number of concepts. Also, his omniscience entails abstract existence, and abstract existence entails his omniscience. One cannot exist without the other. His omniscience is truly infinite. His omniscience completely and infinitely encompasses all of existence, both abstract and concrete, and therefore absolutely nothing can be hidden from him. In other words, absolutely nothing can be unknown to him as he completely and perfectly knows absolutely everyone and everything that does exist, used to exist, will exist, and could exist. Also, his omniscience eternally and infinitely encompasses all possible experiences, perceptions, and senses such as hearing and seeing without him needing to possess any type of subjective experience, perception, or sense. He completely and perfectly knows absolutely all of our subjective experiences, perceptions, and senses. In other words, he knows how absolutely all depictions, images, imaginations, photos, pictures, and visualizations look like. And he knows how each and every color, light, shape, and size look like, from the perspective of each and every possible individual who does exist and could exist. He knows how absolutely all audios, music, noises, sounds, and voices sound like from the perspective of each and every possible individual who does exist and could exist. He knows how absolutely all fragrances, odors, and scents smell like from the perspective of each and every possible individual who does exist and could exist. He knows how absolutely all physical feelings and sensations feel like from the perspective of each and every possible individual who does exist and could exist. And he knows how absolutely all types of taste and flavors taste like from the perspective of each and every possible individual who does exist and could exist. In the next presentation, we will better understand his capacity of intention and capacity of inner speech. In this presentation, we will better understand the capacity of intention and the capacity of inner speech of the God of Natural Theology. To be truly conscious, one must possess an amount or degree of independence, which entails that he or she must possess both abilities and knowledge, because independence entails both abilities and knowledge. In simpler words, to be truly conscious, you must possess knowledge of yourself and your surroundings, and you must possess the ability of containing and preserving your knowledge. Therefore, consciousness entails both abilities and knowledge. Consciousness also entails both the mental capacity of intention and the mental capacity of inner speech. That is to say, to be truly conscious, you must possess the mental capacity of making intentions in your consciousness, and you must also possess the mental capacity of inner speech. Inner speech is simply the mental process of communicating your intentions to yourself in your own consciousness. Possessing abilities entails consciousness, as well as the mental capacity of intention and inner speech, and possessing knowledge entails consciousness, as well as the mental capacity of intention and inner speech. The attributes of ability and knowledge are perfectly consistent with the attributes of intention and inner speech. To perform any type of action, a conscious being must first make the intention to perform the action. That is to say, he or she simply must intend to perform an action in order for the action to happen according to how he or she wants the action to happen. Intentions and actions are not the same thing. An intention is a mental change in one's consciousness, whereas an action is an external change, which happens completely outside of one's self or consciousness, such as a physical change in our universe. The God of Natural Theology is indeed a conscious being. For him to create or perform any type of action, he must first intend to create or perform the action according to how he wants it to be created. If he intends to create something, such as a universe, he must simply intend to create it. As he is truly omnipotent or all-powerful, simply intending to create anything simply means effortlessly willing something into existence from absolute nothing, such as him creating a universe or multiverse out of absolutely nothing at all. When he created our universe, he first had to simply intend to create our universe with all of its physical constants and laws from absolute nothing. His infinite power or omnipotence effortlessly actualized the creation of our universe exactly according to how he wanted it to be created and designed. Absolutely all of his intentions are completely inside his consciousness, which is of himself because he is infinitely simple and absolutely cannot be made of parts. Absolutely all of his intentions are completely non-essential changes in himself, which simply means that they can do absolutely nothing whatsoever to essentially or truly change himself in any manner. Remember that he himself is essentially or truly unchangeable. Therefore, his intentions can only and do only truly change his creation, which is all of contingent existence. Absolutely all of the actions he creates and performs are completely outside of himself and completely separate from himself. All types of actions are essential changes, which are logically impossible for him. The God of Natural Theology is the greatest conscious being as he uniquely possesses eternal infinite independence, as well as true omnipotence and true omniscience. He also uniquely possesses two more attributes: the eternal infinite capacity of intention and the eternal infinite capacity of inner speech. Both his eternal infinite capacity of intention and his eternal infinite capacity of inner speech are essential attributes for him to possess as the greatest conscious being. Both his capacity of intention and capacity of inner speech directly entail each other. Both his omnipotence and omniscience directly entail his capacity of intention and capacity of inner speech, and both his capacity of intention and capacity of inner speech directly entail his omnipotence and omniscience because his flawless self-consistency entails that all of his attributes perfectly entail each other. Both his capacity of intention and inner speech indirectly entail his uniqueness because both attributes not only are completely unique to him, but also are ontologically dissimilar to all of contingent existence. Both attributes are completely immaterial, spaceless, and timeless as his uniqueness entails that he himself is completely immaterial, spaceless, and timeless. Also, his uniqueness indirectly entails both his capacity of intention and inner speech because for him to be truly unique is for him to possess truly unique attributes like the eternal infinite capacity of intention and the eternal infinite capacity of inner speech, which are both completely unique to him and are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly unique uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his capacity of intention and inner speech indirectly entail his eternity because both attributes are eternally true of him. Both attributes are beginningless, endless, truly eternal and uncreated as his eternity entails that he himself is beginningless, endless, truly eternal and uncreated. Also, his eternity indirectly entails both his capacity of intention and inner speech because for him to be actually eternal is for him to possess truly eternal attributes like the eternal infinite capacity of intention and the eternal infinite capacity of inner speech, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly eternal uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his capacity of intention and inner speech indirectly entail his infinity because both attributes are infinitely true of him. Both attributes are truly infinite as his infinity entails that he himself is truly infinite in every logically possible manner. Also, his infinity indirectly entails both his capacity of intention and inner speech because for him to be actually infinite is for him to possess truly infinite attributes like the eternal infinite capacity of intention and the eternal infinite capacity of inner speech, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly infinite uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his capacity of intention and inner speech indirectly entail his immutability because both attributes are immutably true of him. Both attributes are permanently unchangeable as his immutability entails that he is truly unchangeable. Also, his immutability indirectly entails both his capacity of intention and inner speech because for him to be truly unchangeable is for him to possess truly unchangeable attributes like the eternal infinite capacity of intention and the eternal infinite capacity of inner speech, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the truly immutable uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his capacity of intention and inner speech indirectly entail his infinite simplicity because both attributes are infinitely simple in him. Neither attribute can be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicities, as his infinite simplicity entails that all of his attributes are one and the same indivisible and infinitely simple being, which is simply himself. Therefore, absolutely none of his attributes can be divided or limited into parts or finite simplicity. Also, his infinite simplicity indirectly entails both his capacity of intention and inner speech because for him to be infinitely simple is for him to possess infinitely simple attributes like the eternal infinite capacity of intention and eternal infinite capacity of inner speech, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the infinitely simple uncreated creator of contingent existence. Both his capacity of intention and inner speech indirectly entail his infinite independence because both attributes are completely and infinitely independent of his creation, which is contingent existence. Neither attribute can be dependent on anything as his infinite independence entails that he is completely and infinitely independent of all types of conditions, dependencies, increases, limits, ontological similarities, parts, and finite simplicity. Also, his infinite independence indirectly entails both his capacity of intention and inner speech, because for him to be completely and infinitely independent is for him to possess truly infinitely independent attributes like the eternal infinite capacity of intention and the eternal infinite capacity of inner speech, which are both necessary attributes for him to possess as the infinitely independent uncreated creator of contingent existence. Essential changes and non-essential changes are completely different, as there are fundamental differences between them. Remember that essential changes are temporal limits like units of time, absolute beginnings and ends, whereas the God of Natural Theology is immaterial, spaceless, timeless, and truly eternal, infinite, and uncreated. He absolutely cannot truly change himself in any manner, even if he tried to do so, because his immutability entails that he is truly unchangeable, which also entails that he absolutely cannot change any of his attributes in any manner. Being truly unchangeable entails that essential changes are logically impossible for him. However, his immutability does allow non-essential changes in himself, because non-essential changes can do absolutely nothing whatsoever to essentially or truly change him. In other words, non-essential changes absolutely cannot truly change himself in any manner. His intentions are completely non-essential changes in himself. In other words, his intentions absolutely cannot change any of his attributes. Therefore, his intentions are not in conflict with any of his attributes. Moreover, his instances of inner speech are completely non-essential changes in himself. In other words, his instances of inner speech absolutely cannot change any of his attributes. Therefore, they are not in conflict with any of his attributes. His capacity of intention is indeed an attribute, whereas the actual intentions he makes in his consciousness are not attributes and cannot be attributes, because they are simply just instances which are completely non-essential changes of his capacity to make intentions in his consciousness. Also, his capacity of inner speech is indeed an attribute, whereas the actual instances of inner speech he makes in his consciousness are not attributes and cannot be attributes, because they are simply just instances in his consciousness, which are completely non-essential changes of his capacity of inner speech. We have reached the end of this video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment on the video. Thank you for watching.